The Stamp Act, passed by the British Parliament in 1765, imposed duties on newspapers, legal documents, pamphlets, and even playing cards, purchased in Britain's American and West Indian colonies. While stamp duties were not unusual in Britain, and colonial assemblies in New York and Massachusetts had introduced similar measures themselves, this act proved highly inflammatory and is regarded as a key milestone on the road to the American Revolutionary War. The Grenville administration introduced the Stamp Act to raise money to help pay for the ongoing defense of the American colonies after the costly 7 Years' War. It was only fair, the government and its supporters argued, that the colonists should contribute to the cost of stationing British soldiers in North America. As Charles Townshend put it, "If America looks to Great Britain for protection, she must enable us to protect her. If she expects our fleets, she must assist our revenue." Grenville further sought to win over the colonists by giving them a year to propose alternatives to the Stamp Act, and by reassuring them that the duty would be collected by themselves, not tax gatherers sent from Britain. Opponents of the act argued that these concessions missed the point. Any tax designed to raise money, as opposed to regulate trade, could only legitimately be introduced with the consent of the colonial assemblies. An act passed thousands of miles away in London, by a parliament in which they had no representation, they argued, violated the cherished right of all freeborn Englishmen, on both sides of the Atlantic, that taxation could only be raised with the consent of the people. This argument, expressed memorably as no taxation without representation, even had its supporters in Britain, including the former Prime Minister Pitt the Elder, the Earl of Chatham.
The Commons of America, represented in their several assemblies, have ever been in possession of the exercise of this, their constitutional right of giving and granting their own money. They would have been slaves if they had not enjoyed it. At the same time, this kingdom, as the supreme governing and legislative power, has always bound the colonies by her laws, by her regulations and restrictions in trade, in navigation, in manufactures, in everything except that of taking their money out of their pockets without their consent. The gentlemen tell us America is obstinate. America is almost in open rebellion. I rejoice that America has resisted.
The imposition of the Stamp Act led to riots, boycotts of British imports, and the burning of effigies of the hated stamp men. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Atlantic, the right of Parliament to impose the act had also taken on the character of a matter of principle. In Britain, one of the most important constitutional principles, hard fought for since the English Civil War, was the idea that Parliament is sovereign. This meant Parliament had the authority to pass any laws that had the support of both the House of Commons and the House of Lords. This right was taken to extend to all British colonies. Meanwhile, George III, often regarded as the pantomime villain in the story of the American Revolution, was deeply uneasy about any concessions which compromised the sovereignty of Parliament, or which could be seen as giving into violence and disorder. The resolution of the Stamp Act crisis fell to the next British administration led by the Earl of Rockingham. The Stamp Act was repealed, with the government citing the need to restore normal trade. This removed the immediate cause of the crisis, while the Declaratory Act of 1766 reasserted the right of the British Parliament to pass any laws it saw fit concerning the colonies. For this reason, repeal failed to resolve the underlying problem of how to reconcile the wish of the British government to uphold parliamentary sovereignty and make the colonies contribute to the cost of their defense, on the one hand, with the colonists' argument that internal revenue could only be raised with their consent, on the other. This is why the stakes were so high for both sides, and how a tax on playing cards, among other goods, helped spark the American Revolution.